So I've got a young male patient of mine that will come into session, and we usually spend the first 40 minutes in silence or thereabouts. You know, there might be a little bit of an exchange, but not a huge amount. And it's quite painful and heartbreaking to see, you know, that he is just kind of sitting there fearful of ridicule, rejection, that something inherent about him is going to be exposed, that I'm going to see it and judge him for that. And this is the Defectiveness Shame Schema. I'm Rita Younan, and this is 7 Minute Schemas.
I'm Ruth Holt, and we're working our way through a series of all the schemas that are part of Jeff Young's schema therapy model. There's 18 maladaptive schemas, and defectiveness and shame schema is one of the biggest, most challenging schemas. He talks about as being one of the big four, often a schema that people have learned from very early in life as a result of trauma, as a result of verbal abuse, as a result of a sexual or physical abuse, where children, because of where they sit developmentally, they don't have a capacity to understand what's going on around them and attribute the right kind of blame in a way for the behavior. What children do, because they're egocentric, is they attribute blame to themselves. They attribute shame to themselves. They feel there's something wrong with them and they're defective. And that can not just be a thought process. Obviously, it's very much an emotional feeling of shame, feeling of worthlessness, and it can be held in the body. It can certainly be connected to many memories of abuse. So for you, Rita, working with this client, you know, that's a hard thing to be working with.
It certainly is, and it's also quite painful too, because you know that inherently they're a lovely, worthwhile, amazing individual, but saying all of that is going to just fall on deaf ears. And in fact, one of the things that you need to be mindful of when working with defectiveness shame is, are they able to actually integrate any of that? And that it needs to be quite authentic in terms of how and when you say it, so that when they're ready to receive it, it's really felt, as opposed to going, oh, look, they've got a defectiveness shame schema. The negative core belief around it is something about worthlessness. How about I just say something that makes them feel worthwhile? You know, it really needs to be felt and delivered in a way that's authentic in order to really heal and start to target that schema. So it's really opportunistic, you know, and just kind of working with what's happening in the room.
And I think it's really important then, isn't it, to create a therapy environment that feels safe, feels validating, and, you know, we can communicate that not just with our words, but with our presence, without being too rushed or too kind of task focused, you know, in a way that sort of feels like you're not that important. We just need to get on with the therapy. So there's lots of really subtle cues that we can be working on, you know, within our own body, within our own way that we conduct the therapy, to make it safe enough for these clients to reveal that shame that they hide from the world. This is, I think, a really challenging thing where, you know, the limited reparenting relationship that we're trying to create in working in schema therapy is crucial. It sounds like for you with this client, it's been, you know, it can be a slow process. You know, some clients, I think, can wear their defectiveness shame fairly, you know, I guess, overtly. They can come in, walk in and say, there's something wrong with me. I can't hold down a job. I can't keep a relationship. They've got the words for it, but it doesn't sound like this client does have the words.
No, it's more kind of a felt sense, you know, of being kind of triggered into that defectiveness shame schema as a result of that. You know, therapy is a very intimate relationship. And so I guess kind of being in that type of situation activates that schema and makes it very acutely painful for the individual.
And I think one of the things that you can do in that kind of scenario is start to give some language, give some words for that vulnerable, shamed child that person has, you know, to maybe even talk to that part of them that hasn't got words yet, but maybe feeling very fearful being in the room. So we might not get it right all the time, but we can sometimes intuit as clinicians and say, I'm wondering if part of the distress for you is just feeling really not okay right now, feeling really unsafe, or feeling really like that you're not worthy of my time, you know. And so we're sort of just gently kind of starting to give some language that we've got to tune in to the client to see if it resonates for them.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, if we would talk about modes, if you like, it's likely that the patient really is in a vulnerable child mode. This particular patient is anyway, you know, very much in a vulnerable child mode. And how do you foster connection without putting on too much pressure to make them feel even more defective for not using therapy properly, by not talking enough, etc. Because usually what happens is they'll leave that session, and that criticism of defectiveness is then kind of part of the critic mode, which then fuels that chronic feelings of hopelessness and depression and worthlessness.
And already there you're starting to differentiate the different parts, the different modes that might be maintaining that. There's a critic that is often an introject of that, you know, early abusive figure, and certainly the younger and more intense that abuse, the more prevalent the defectiveness schema will be. For more of our kind of depressed or chronically anxious clients, it may not present quite as kind of wordlessly. It may be held a little bit more like what I described. I can't hold down a job, or I'm defective, there's something wrong with me. And certainly all the cognitive and behavioral interventions can be very helpful, but again, we still want to bring that experiential techniques into bear. So, you know, doing imagery rescripting with the original authority figures or the original abusive figures that may have given those messages to our clients.
Yeah, and I think for that type of example, it's likely that that particular patient is able to do imagery rescripting, whereas the young gentleman that I described, not quite there yet. So it might be a little bit more of limited reparenting in the room before we get to that phase.
Yeah, look, there's lots to discuss, and we'll certainly be discussing this more at our online training, which is going to be at the links at the end of this video. So thanks, Rita, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Thank you, Ruth.